Well, good afternoon, good evening. It's cocktail hour with Pete. We build it as dinner with Pete, but you know what? I think Pete's such a busy guy. He actually is like doing cocktails with some people, doing dinner with others. If only all of us were as popular as Pete Erskine, you know. But thanks for opening up your house tonight, Pete. It looks eerily familiar to the office that we share with you on a daily basis, but we appreciate that. We're kind of feeling lonely these days. So here we are. We see some folks are filing in. Take your shoes off, right? Find a good sofa. Try to maintain some spacing, right? You don't want Pete spitting on you as he's teaching today. How many times can you go to dinner and do Riedel? There you go. 6-foot spacing, almost. Not quite. But tonight's topic, the 15-step program, right? As we were talking through a lot of things, everybody kept coming back. Oh, I like learning all this. I like this. I like that. Can you just explain to me in like 10 easy steps how to do something? It's like, well, that's not how any of this works, right? It's not about 10 easy steps. But Pete, as always, took that challenge personally. He says, I can name that tune in 15 steps. And that's what tonight is about. It's not about necessarily saying how fast can I do something, but the logical progression that you follow when you're building your show, and specifically around Riedel and Artist. And Peter, the organic Riedel mixer, I think on our first seminar I said that because every show I've done with Pete, I come in the next day, I'm like, what'd you do? He goes, I just tweaked a little, just trying to make it a little better, right? And there's always some little function or a cool little feature. I push the button and it does something today it didn't do yesterday. As long as it keeps talking to the right people, I don't really care, right? But now tonight is about that, and Jeff is joining us. You'll probably remember him from our MeteorNet sessions, we thought this will be an interesting one. This one will be kind of we figured if we have Jeff here, then we can play Stump Pete, right? And I will guarantee you, my goal is to find Pete's answer to a question and then go, okay, but technically, here's how it's supposed to work, right? But the Pete Erskine, yeah, but you can make this work. It's okay, got it, right? And so tonight, that's what we're going to be dealing with, or this afternoon, this evening. So thank you, Jeff, for being a part of this. Really appreciate it. So Pete, Mac, talk them through this. You have some very, very specific instructions when it comes to, because we're going to have a ton of people asking questions tonight, right? And people are going to be asking them out of order, and that's quite fine, right?
You're giving my speech there, Kelly. It's
whoa, I'm swimming out of my lane. So I'm going to click off here, and
I don't have specific instructions. I have instructions about being specific. So I can see a lot of familiar names there on the list, so I'm sure you've all heard the spiel. But in the GoToWebinar control panel, there's a little pull-down menu for questions. That's where you type in your questions. Only we will see all of the questions. If we respond to them in that window and say respond all, then everybody will see them. But generally, we will respond by talking on the video. But when you ask your question, please be specific, because it won't be answered the moment that you enter it. And by the time it gets answered, it's going to be 3 minutes later, 5 minutes later, 20 minutes later.
Old news.
So please be specific in your question about exactly what you're talking about. The same thing for comments or responses. Unless they are specific, they don't make any sense. So I'm looking forward to this because I don't know about how many of you on that list have worked with a director named Scott Levine, but turns out Scott is colorblind and can't tell the colors on a Riedel panel as to when his talk is latched. So what he likes you to do is make his button flash when it's latched. And you can write a little logic statement to make that work. But I keep forgetting how to do it, and I would love to have it saved somewhere where I can just reinstall it every time I'm working with Scott. And Pete is going to show us how to do that, something I don't know how to do. So Pete and Jeff, take it away.
Terrific, terrific. What was I supposed to do today? I forget. The main thing I'm talking about is my 15-step program to programming your artist. Now, technically, it's a few more steps than 15, but I numbered it this way. The key part of starting any program for me is to have a basic template that I always start from, and that's really the first 3 items on the list. The modify markers, set my panel and key defaults, enter my logic diagrams. I save those as a 32-port node. And then whatever show I'm working on, I always just enter that first and then build the show around it. But there are ways to get those markers, key defaults, and logic diagrams into your existing show with a few caveats about it. We'll get to those at the end here. So one of the things I want you to note here on the right-hand side in the director limit section, the little part down in the bottom, 20 active audio sources per destination. That means that only 20 things can go to one location. After that, you don't hear anything. Now, I've had a couple of clients come to me and say, my Riedel system isn't working, it isn't working. And I go in and all their 4 wires and all of their ins and outs are all programmed as always, which means they're always connected all the time. So once they get 20 of them plugged into any one place, like a panel, number 21 just doesn't bother going through. So that's why you always program any feed as a Vox input, which means it's not really active until there's real audio on it. And by the time there's 20 different things with audio on it talking at the same time, you don't want to hear the 21st anyway. So that's just one little thing to remember, and I'm going to address that. Now, there's a couple of situations where I do use always. One is if I'm transporting audio from one node to the other. I don't want the Vox thing clicking off, even the silence of it. I want the audio to go straight through. And the second thing is, if I have a PL or a conference for the stage managers in their wireless bell packs, I always set it to always, because if I set it to Vox, even though this is a digital system, there is a little bit of hiss in the background. And the Vox, you hear it turn off. And I have had stage managers come to me and say their wireless bell pack is dropping out. It's dropping out all the time. And I listen to it, and sure enough, when there's silence, it goes silent. So I just turn it on to always, and they hear the hiss all the time, and they're happy then. So and just remember that, and we'll get to that. So here we are in which is basically my template in which I've done several things. First of all, I have programmed one node in it, and in that one node, I put one panel in it, which is basically my panel. It's going to be that panel right there. I have created already a bunch of standard groups and conferences. And here I have production main, production audio, production lights, production video, production ASM. Now, what is that? Well, what I've done is on this key right here, the production key, I have stacked those 5 different production channels on this one key. This will be the key that the production stage manager talks to. And when you do this, the stage manager is heard by every one of those production channels, but the ASM, the audio, the video, the lights don't hear all of the responses and audio going back to the production stage manager. And it makes for a much quieter production channel. My belief always is the stage manager production channel, production stage manager should only need one channel bell pack, and that should be on production. They don't need to talk to any of the other channels. If anybody needs to talk to them, they can talk on production, but that somehow never works out that way. Another thing about this particular system of putting stack productions on there comes into play when you have hundreds of panels and belt packs. There's the cacophony of sound and conversation back and forth, even though it's a production channel, gets uncontrollable. I've also been on very small shows where the audio people, I don't want to hear the lighting people talk to the stage manager. I don't want to hear the video people. So this solves that whole thing. So on the individual panels for ASM audio, video, and lights, they will just have a single production channel. And on the stage manager, we have a stacked key. And instead of putting it up there, I'm going to put it down here. There's another couple of things on here. One of my logic diagrams that are my favorite to have all the time is a diagram to beep me when there's a problem. And this is the logic input that beeps me. This is the key on my panel that is normally off, and therefore by inverting it, it's on here, and there it's and then it comes to here and it beeps me. Just beep my panel, just like that. And then here is a power logic diagram, which is I put one of these on every single panel in the whole show. And what this is an input on the power, it's inverted. So when there's nothing there, this is on and vice versa. And then in the power, it then basically beeps me. I also add to this point a command to flash the LEDs above the individual point-to-point button for that particular panel. Now, how is this used? If I look at that one panel here, the one panel I put up here, if I put a logic diagram on this function right here, it is positive when the panel is powered up, and it's negative when the power is off or loses connection. So there's my logic right there. It's on all the time when the power is working, and as soon as I unplug the power or unplug the data, it goes off, and therefore I get an indication. Now, Artist does have an error panel alarm that comes up and will say when panels go offline, but it doesn't ring a bell, it doesn't jump up and down, it doesn't tell me a whole lot of stuff. So you don't really notice that much. Sometimes I sort of push it off out of the way because it tells you a bunch of other things that are happening, like if there aren't panels installed on your system that you never had an intention of putting on, but they're programmed, it'll give you an error. So I put this in here, and that means I'll set up a second panel with all the point-to-points for everybody in the system. And this one button here will monitor, this one input, a logic diagram for each one will monitor the panels. And first time I developed this was for the Beijing Olympics for Riedel. We had a big system, over 100 panels, over 100 or 200 belt packs, all over the place in a stadium that was huge. And I think we had 16 nodes spread around the stadium. And I was concerned about monitoring all these nodes because most of them were in spaces that didn't have anybody sitting next to them. So we went to one of the most fascinating little stores in Beijing that I've ever seen, where you go in and every stall sells just one thing. One stall sells just relays, another stall sells just USB cables. And we went in, and we bought all this great stuff. And I made basically a DB9 cable that plugs into the back of a panel into the relay out jack, and it triggered a relay. It was triggered by a relay that was run by a transformer that was plugged into the wall. So as long as there was power coming out of the wall, the relay wasn't activated. And as soon as the power came on, the relay activated. Our power went off. The normally open would trigger it, and I'd get a beep. And so one day, close to opening, the Chinese were reviewing everything we were doing, and we're taking the production manager around to look at all different places. And I didn't know they were doing this review. I was up reading my book, Dan Brown. I was into about the third book of 15, and So they're walking around and they went into one of these rooms deep down in the underside of the stadium, where there was a node that had the amplifiers for the antennas in the tunnels. And this was for a radio system. We had a leaky coax antenna system that went around both sides of the tunnel. And he went in there, and the Chinese said, "Oh, very nice." And one of them said, "Well, what happens if you lose power?" And he walks over and pulls the power plug on the wall, and the UPS starts beeping and beeping and beeping. And they, "Well, what's the problem?" It's going to beep and then it's going to die. And all of a sudden my panels lit up, and I immediately get on the radio and say, "We've lost power in the da 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 room." And the Chinese go, wonder of wonders. So I've used it on many other shows, and recently, most all UPSs have network capability, so you can network them into a computer and watch them that way. So this little trick is not always done, but I do like to do it for panels, because often I'll notice that a panel is offline way before I'll notice that the error shows on the error screen. So I've got my basic panel set up. I've got my logic diagrams on. Oh, another one of my favorite logic diagrams is one I called Flash, which looks like this. And I like to import this because it just takes a little bit of time, and I have to look it up somewhere to figure out how I did it. And what this does is, I'm going to slide over here to another picture here. What this does is, this is the flash button that I put on a key for, let's say, the front of house board operator. When they press this key, it will flash a 1 second flash at the monitor console. And they will continue to talk back and forth now between the front of house and the monitor console. But as long as the conversation doesn't have a gap longer than 10 seconds, it won't flash anymore. It only flashes once and then doesn't reset itself until there's a silence of 10 seconds. So this was done on a job where I just did a straight flash each one, and they said, "Why my light is flashing on and off all the time? Remember I talk, I don't like it." So for that show, I just put on a separate key, but this allows me to drop it right on the key. So back in Riedel world, I've got all my basic stuff set up in my template. First thing I want to do, I'm going to save it as a new show. Rather than right over my template. And now I'm going to go back to the network, to this net panel here. And I know that I'm going to use a 32 port node at backstage. I'm going to add another 32, which is going to be at front of house. And I'm going to add a 64, which is going to have my Bolero and some analog stuff on it. And I can click on the little magic diagram here, and it basically organizes them and draws a line around them. Although, as far as I've been told, you have to have the line there, but it doesn't care which nodes it connects to or what order it connects to. So I don't know what the purpose of the line is other than making the drawing nice. So I'm going to name these 2-node stage, which is going to be by me. I'm going to name number 2. I'm going to name this one 4-node. Node front of house, and I'm going to name this one 6-node Bolero. So I've got these basically named, but I want to also look at the properties on each of these three and set the address of that to be the addresses of what I think they are. So I'm going to start at the highest one, because it'll give me an error if I start at the lowest one. I'm going to set these to be 4, 2, 4, 6. And these are the node addresses I'll have to put on the hardware to make it come out the right thing, to make the director connect to the right nodes. So here I've got my basic nodes. I'm going to pop through these nodes now and put some of the systems on here. I'm going to start with putting, on my default node, I made it coax Cat5 analog. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put on a 1100 series DCP 1116. And I'm just going to put 4 or 5 of those on there because I know there's several people backstage, all the video people, everybody backstage is going to want a panel. And then I'm going to go to front of house, and I know there's at least 4 people at front of house that need panels. So I'm going to add to the front of house node a coax panel and a Cat5 panel and an analog panel. And I'm going to put 4 panels there, 1116. And typically I place them as a matter of course on odd ports in case I want to make a panel 2-channel, two port, stereo. Normally it's not, but it's often for people up at front of house. Sometimes I put a speaker sitting next to the panel, which had program coming out of it, and I use the second channel to feed that. Also at front of house, I'm going to have some audio I/O, which is coming from the front of house console there, and I'm going to have a couple of 4 wires for a radio repeater I'm going to put out at front of house. And here on the Bolero node, I'm going to add an AES67 card. And I would add as many cards as I really needed, but I'm just going to do 1 for this demo right here. And in AES67, the first Bolero belt pack you put on becomes number 1. And then they're auto numerated after that. So I just keep adding them, and I'll show you where that's being updated in a second. So I'm going to put 5 or 6 of these on here. And if I look at the actual pack and look at the properties, there's a Bolero tab, and that Bolero tab, here's number 1. So I'm going to put the IPs for these multicast. I'm going to do 192.168.042.161. And I do 161. Oh, you're right. I'm doing the wrong number. 239.255. That's what I do. 239.255.42.161. 1 being like that one up there, Bolero user ID. And the 42 and the 161 are arbitrary numbers. That's just what I picked. So then I go into Bolero number 2, and I can go directly to properties by right-clicking there and go to the Bolero tab, and it's number 2. So this is going to be 239.255.042.162. And then I go into the third one, and it's going to be 239.255.042.163. Now this is not going to give me any errors until I actually try to plug into the Bolero, but I always like to get them all programmed before I actually get to the hardware.
Pete, do you ever expand the tree and on the network tab and just right click on them over there, interact with them that way?
164. I don't like to work from the network tab. It's just uncomfortable for me to do that. You mean right click here?
Yeah, you can right click there and get to the properties as well.
Yeah, it's the same. It's basically the same thing. But I just have never liked the feel of the network tab rather than I like the spreadsheet feel of the other. But either one will work fine.
Some people I think might find it a little faster if you're already programming and have panels on the right. I just wanted to bring it up.
Oh, that's good work. Yep. 042 and 165. I wish that these Bolero IPs were in this screen here, which is the port screen where you have all kinds of other stuff you can edit. Why not edit the IPs of those ports right here? I mean, it just is we were talking about this before the show.
Definitely something
You know.
that we all realize is
Sure.
possibility to address, you know.
Sure.
Sometimes
So,
though, it's
and
how often are we setting up the system, you know? You and
well,
I,
you know,
all the
we do
time.
it all the time. Yeah, right. 239-255-042-166.
Okay,
There
so
are
Pete,
done all those. Go ahead.
can I interrupt for a moment? So you picked that multicast address. Why didn't you just use 23900 and start with
Oh,
one?
you have
Because,
to.
that
Because I've gotten used to typing this, because I have to type 3 characters anyway. 239. I could use 0. I could 239-000.
and
Zero,
then
zero,
just
zero.
single digits, because that's way less typing. You just tab through it and
You still have to type 0. Oh, you could use tabs. It's okay. So I saved 2 strokes.
Just tab, I think.
You could. I've also, on a bigger system, copied this 9-digit number into a text file and just
Or into your
pasted it
clipboard, so you can just
in
paste
the
it.
clipboard and just paste it straight in. Sure, no, it's faster. This
Much
is
faster.
since this is auto enumerated up here, I always wonder why it doesn't auto enumerate the multicast, but
Right.
you know, so that's just a little bit of extra work you have to do for that.
Well, they don't have to be in order, and unfortunately, that's why they don't auto enumerate, right?
Well, they don't have. I don't know why you
start-
wouldn't want them in order. Why would you not want them in order?
Well, maybe you're in a
What
big
kind of
facility and
OCD person are you?
maybe you're in a big facility and your IT department is only giving you specific IP
That's
addresses
probably
that you
true.
can use.
That's probably true. Yep, definitely. And then they just throw an analog card in here. It's going to have some 4 wires into the truck. So this rack is going to be located next to the truck, and this is where we're going to interface our party lines into the truck. And so now we've got basically these three places filled up with things. I don't have anything backstage here, so I probably want to have a couple of split audios for my IFBs. And let me lower this so you can see what it is here. So I've got an in and an out here for some IFBs, and these are my panels up there. I'm going to put some belt packs backstage, C3 belt packs. Come on. And so there's going to be 5 belt packs back here. And then at front of house, there's a couple of belt packs for board ops. And maybe follow spots being fed directly above. So now we've got basically all of the hardware programmed, and we have ended up with a lot of extremely archaic labels here, which don't do us any good to find out where things are. So I've come up with this way to simplify this for me. I go to this screen here, which is basically listing all the ports, long description, short description. And I sort it. The reason I'm sorting it is I'm going to paste into these columns here from Excel the correct add names, the repaired names that are the way I like them. But as you paste into here, every line that's pasted in, the entire screen resorts. So everything gets totally out of order if you're sorting by this column already. So I sort it by the port, then by the node, and then by the type of device. So now I have all my 2-wire inputs together, 2-wire outputs together, 4-wire Bolero, C3 belt packs, and the panels all down on the bottom. So I save this as in the clipboard, and I go to a text file, and I paste it in the text file, and I save it as temp, which is going to be on the desktop. Okay, and I go to my Excel spreadsheet and I run a macro, which is I call load Riedel. And it takes that file and it makes this column. So now it takes this information right here and turns it into the ins go there, the outs go there, the four wires go there, the boleros go in this column, the C3s go in this column, the panels in this column. And this is a sum of all those columns, and I paste it over here. So now I have this column going from 1. I'm going to copy this whole column. Command C, and I'm going to go back to here and go into here and paste this long names and paste this short names. So now I have something that is a little easier. First of all, it does two things. It simplifies the labels in the nodes, and when I go to ports, they're sorted, basically, they're always going to be sorted by this. So they're sorted by the type of device they're connected to, and the long name, and the node, and the port, and the port number. So this is port 2, card 1, port 1. So now I can go back and I can go here to this same page here, the ports page, and I can name these real names. So this is going to be 211 is going to be backstage. So this is going to be my panel. And on the belt on the key, it's going to be PCOM. And then this is going to be backstage. It's going to be the A2 panel. And here on the key, it's going to be A2. And then, I'm not doing this here, right?
Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
Do you ever do all this naming you're doing here inside of Excel and then paste it over?
I could do this exact things here and paste it over. You're right. It's a little more awkward doing it here, but I'm only doing a small system, as it were. Sometimes I'll get a system that is already programmed from another show, and I will massage it all in Excel and then paste the whole thing over. So I could do this same thing here in the Excel spreadsheet in here, in this same column right here, and add all the numbers, right, names and numbers right in here, and then paste this column into the long names and this column into the short names. Yes.
And one of the nice things when you do that is you can take advantage of Excel when you're, if you have a bunch of numbers in order, you can just drag down, like, say, camera 1, drag down the green dot on the right-hand side. Now you have cameras 1 through whatever. Kind of just speeds up the process.
If I were naming them camera 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would do that. You're right. But I'm mostly concerned that is, node 6, card 1, slot 1, so I can find it when I'm actually programming. But you're right.
Like your short names, right?
Well, the short names would be probably something else, but you're right. They would probably be camera 1 through 6. So let's say my cameras were in 4 wires back over in the camera land. Your cameras are going to be at front of house. So I put two 4 wires here. So I could put, you're right, camera 1, camera 2.
And another good, I'm sure you've shared this macro with everybody, but did you want to point out basically the easy step to bringing that Word file into Excel as the CSV file? Without using your macro?
Well, yeah, I will. Let me do that manually without using the macro.
Because it's
So it's pretty easy. I'm going to go back here. We got this one right here. I still have this file from when I worked before. So this is still in the text file. This is a text file that I have saved on the desktop. And I always call it temp text. And every time I do a show, it just, you want to delete it, you want to replace it, etc. So this file is, if I right click, if I do my sort as I described before, so I get things in the right place, do my sort by port, then node, and then port type. And the sorting is all stays here, not over on the left-hand columns. And then I just right click and go to copy grid contents to clipboard, and then go to a plain text file, paste it in here. This is what I get. And if you scroll up to the top, you see that it actually has a bunch of extra lines in here. And then it has lines that actually label the columns. So if I take this file and go into Excel and I file open, and I open from the desktop that file, not what I wanted to do. File open, temp, and I say open. I've got to get rid of the other file first. Hold on. Close. There we go. File open. Now in earlier versions of Excel, you had to specify you're opening a text file when you're doing this, but in the latest version, it will open a text file fine. It goes to this screen first. And I'm going to do a delimited file, characters and commas, but I'll do that. Here you see those extra lines that were in the text file up at the top, the first three. I don't want to do anything based on those because I'm going to get rid of those eventually. So I'm going to scan down a little bit. And if I go to the next screen, no, I want to say delimited and go to the next screen. I'm going to delimit by a comma or a tab. And it already divides all these columns into columns to fit in Excel. And then if I say finish, they all just come in like that. So then I delete these first three rows because I don't care about those. Now I just have my long names, my short names, alias, the port gain, port type, same three columns I sorted from before. Now what my macro does is it deletes the period from everything in this column. It takes the first character of the node name, and that's why I put the node number, the first in line, and it makes a number 241, and then it does a search on these types: 2-wire input, 2-wire output, 4-wire IO, Bolero, C3 bell pack, DCP or RCP, and adds a 2-letter indicator for me. So I do an IN, an OT, a 4W, a BO, a C3, or a PA for panels. So the numbers I end up with, plus that 3-digit number I've made out of this column and the first letter of this column, make my short name. And then I just paste that short name in this column and then transfer it over. Now, I should have said at the beginning of the show, and I forgot to, in the handouts section of your tab, there's a bunch of pictures of some of the things I'm showing you, but there's also a link to download Director. And this was as a gift from Riedel. Normally, they want you to be a purchaser of hardware, et cetera, to download it, but they agreed to let people in this particular show download them. So you can go to that download Director and get a copy of Director for yourself to have and to hold. And you won't have to binge watch any TV shows anymore. You'll just spend all your time programming Director. It'll be great. So that's the easy way to get in here. Now this, anytime I copy something just like this, copy, and I go back to Director and I click on cell in there and I right click, one of the options is paste long names from the clipboard. Or if I do it in the second column, paste local labels from the clipboard. None of the other columns really do that. You know, it's just that. Now, one of the other things I like to do in this particular column, looking at ports and in the input gain control, I always feel that C3s are too hot. So I will just go -5, -5, -5, -5, -5, -5, -5, -5, -5, and -5. So now I've taken all my C3s and set their input gain into the Riedel to -5. And I can adjust it later. I can come back to the same place and I can change the output gain from the Riedel to that individual bell pack. The same with 4 wires. If I'm on a show with a lot of truck 4 wires, I may, instead of set my gains right here, which I very well could, I will set them from my panel. And if I right click on here and go down to adjust input output gain on this particular panel, I can see that here's where those volumes are manually. I could change them here or change them in this display right here, and this would change. So if I change this to 5 and say, okay, it's going to be 5 over here. So also, if I'm on this particular thing and I hit function key 2 always it takes you into edit mode. So function key 2, 0, and it steps to the next column. So once you're in the ports tab, it just scrolls down to the next one. It's very easy to set all your levels. One other thing I like to do, let's go to the truck inputs. And the trucks were all going to be on the Riedel node, which is this one right here. So it's going to be, it's going to be the truck, and it's going to be production or cams, and I'm going to put a period at the beginning of this section here. And you have to hit enter. And the reason I'm going to put a period at the beginning is it will force this name to the left-hand side of the crosspoint viewing screen. Now, I can't demonstrate crosspoint viewing to you because I'm not connected to a node, but it's basically an XY thing with the inputs along this side and the outputs on here. So by naming this with a period, it will make it the first thing in the column on my port crosspoints. And I'm going to put the short name for this 4 wire as cams. Now I may call something else cam, so I'm going to just call it camera. Now what that's going to do is, I did this wrong. This is going to be, this one here is going to be video. And this one is going to be cams. And this one here is going to be video. And I'm going to put a period at the beginning of this one. Now what this does is, it forces it to the left-hand side of the XY cross matrix. So it'll be the first thing you see in the screen. And on the top, these labels are the labels in the crosspoint screen. So along the top of the crosspoint screen, we'll be able to say cameras and video. So anytime anybody's talking on the cameras channel, their inputs are showing down on the left, they will appear in the first column on the cameras channel. So when I look at the crosspoint screen, I'll be able to tell who's talking on each party line. So here, the third one will probably be production, and I'll go over and put a period here. And then over here in this column, I'll put production over here. Now, Lord, the short name for the 4 wires is never used anywhere because these 4 wires are all going to go into party lines. So it doesn't matter that I'm naming the short names. They're only going to be usable for you when you're looking at the cross point. Now, I have a picture of the cross point system working. Let me look at that. Look at it right here. I think I got it right here.
Repeat.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Those short names would appear if you were doing like a listen to port or a point to point out one of those. Right?
They would appear, but I never, certainly not on truck interfaces for party lines. I'm concerning about just only using this only for party lines. Right.
Okay, so that's for party lines, yeah. But if we're point to point,
if a
there's
4
some other
wire is a
functions.
point to point to something else like that, let's see, where do I have that? It should be in the Riedel section here. Multiple intercom. I know it's here. Downloads. Pinouts, Riedel programming, Riedel, who's talking on a PL? So here is a picture of the party line now. So here I see that I have production, cameras PL, lights PL, automation, myself, everything, all these different channels here. These are actual individual belt packs, but these are party lines here. These first 4 right here, and I can see that Jeff is talking in production, and the second channel of the lights are talking on lights, and David is talking on lights. He's the LD, and so I get to see who's actually working on all the channels. This is actually a video of a live show, so you're seeing how as it moves, I can see different people talking on the PLs and see what channel they're talking on. Now, you can certainly tell somebody's talking on a PL by setting your reply key to respond to PLs, but then it's too busy. You'll never know what you're doing because it's switching back and forth. But this will allow you to quickly look and see who's on a PL or what channel they're on. Now, if there's channels I want to do this that are not interfaced to the truck, I would just take an unused 4-wire that's not actually connected to anything. I would just label it the right way. So it would be a particular party line and a particular, like put in if I had party lines that were not interfaced to the truck, but I wanted to monitor who was on those party lines, I would just put a phantom 4-wire on that party line. So here we've got basically everything programmed. What haven't I done here? Oh, basic panel. Let's go back to my panel on the main node here. I started out in my template with a panel, with all these different party lines on it, and they may change for a particular show, but they're pretty standard. You know, you usually have a lights channel, a video channel, camera channel, producer channel, ASM, sound effects, announcer, whatever. And so what I might do is I put the reply in the upper left-hand corner, but let's say I know all the rest of my panels are 16 button panels. So I'm going to just put this over here. I'm going to put a program listen button right next to it. The mute beep, which is only for me, I'm going to put down here. The production key, which is all the different conference channels, is only going to be for one person. And so the rest of these are going to go on all the different channels. Now, what I may do is put actually, I'm not going to do that. This is what I'm going to do different. The stage manager and the A2 also have Bolero belt packs. They have a panel and Bolero belt packs. So how do we deal with that? So here's my Bolero belt pack for the first one. And it's going to be the production stage manager. and I'm going to put a name on there. It's going to be Tracy. So that's the production stage manager. So they have a Bolero bell pack. It's got their super duper production every channel button on it. It's got maybe the ASM's button on it. And maybe it has the audio and the lights because she's running around yelling at them during rehearsal. Now this is Tracy. I'm going to make a new panel for Tracy. I'm going to copy it from this panel. And I'm going to put it on this one right here, which is this one right here, which is at front of house PA 411, panel 411. That's the stage manager's panel. And actually, I'm going to copy them to all of them. So I'm going to go ahead and copy to all of them because the base panel is all going to be the same. And then in the stage, the A2, the 214. Now these are all 16 button panels. And if I copy my panel, which is a 28 button panel, it's only going to copy the first 16 buttons. It was successful. So now if I look at Tracy's panel here, which is the first one here, not the stage, but front of house. Tracy, and this is Tracy. So Tracy can be two different places, and let's say I want to put a bunch of point-to-points to Tracy, because everybody wants to talk to Tracy, because whether she's out on the house or on the floor. So to do that, I created a group. I'm going to create a group, so I'm going to call it 21 PSM Tracy. And I'm going to call the group comma Tracy. And that's so I know when I look at a panel that I put a group on the panel and not. And normally what I do is I do point-to-points in capitals. And all party lines lowercase. So here's Tracy's channel. And I'm going to make members of Tracy's panel, both her, go down here to production. So I'm going to take Tracy's panel and go up here to Tracy's Bolero, and I'm going to make them both members. Now, when I go to all the different panels, like I go to this here, and I go to this panel, which is the A2, and I want to put Tracy on this panel, I'm going to put Tracy's group on the panel. Now, anytime anybody talks to this, they talk to both her panel and her Bolero bell pack. And when she talks back, when this panel calls, she will have it will be a point-to-point, and she will use the reply key on the Bolero, unless she happens to have a point-to-point, or she'll use the direct talk to the A2 or a party line to talk back on her panel. The advantage of this is if I unplug the panel and anybody tried to call her, if there was the Tracy key on the panel directly to her panel and I unplugged it, you get an error. It would say 1/NA, which is a strange thing saying, doesn't work, they're not there. And where I first started using this was on a big show where we had rehearsal tables out in the house for the stage manager, everybody was out in the house, and then in the afternoon they'd go upstairs. First thing I discovered is as soon as they unplugged those panels out in the house, the connections didn't work. So I found out that you could put them all in a group, and now if you unplug one of the panels that's in the group, doesn't give you an error, doesn't care, just isn't there. Even if nothing's plugged into the group, it won't give you an error. So if the Bolero pack's off and her panel's unplugged, you think you're talking to Tracy, but you're not. And I don't know if that's a disadvantage or not, but it's one way to get around having a couple of different things. So I can add yeah, go ahead.
So have you started using the Bolero wireless pack as kind of a remote headset or wireless headset for the panels?
I've seen it used, but I haven't actually done it. And the one thought I had was often what they want on their Bolero is so different than what they want on their panels. There aren't often the same keys that cross over. I mean, there might be a production channel or something like that where you can use a remote key on the belt pack to key the panel to talk to your belt pack. But no, definitely you could use it. How would you set it up?
If you go into one of your Bolero belt packs, I typically just set up all of those keys that you don't need, as you're saying, as virtual keys, right? And then the panel remotes the belt pack's virtual keys.
Right.
Okay, so your users are only ever talking to the belt pack. So Tracy no longer needs two headsets. Tracy just needs one headset, right? And the panel is merely there as a remote control for the belt pack's virtual keys.
So what are you saying? What do you put on the virtual keys?
So let's say that's the party line.
Right.
Why don't you bring up Tracy's panel in the bottom half of the window, the lower drop down. And so I would drag over any, we've got 10 virtual keys, right? Plus 6
Right.
keys that the user can have. So we have a possibility of 16 keys on that one belt pack, right?
Right. Right.
And so you just bring those over. And instead of having those party lines there, what you'll do is say your first key on that 1116 panel is do a remote key function and fire virtual key 1 of Tracy's belt pack.
In addition to its normal operation.
Actually, it's kind of on you as how you want to run it with a lot of producers and stage managers now. And I think the way they're doing it in F1 as well is that they are not stacking the keys. They are relying on the user wearing their belt pack 100% of the time.
Oh,
I kind of tell the story.
Just becoming their headset. Sure. No, that makes sense.
Exactly. Because I mean, I'm sure you've been on a show, right, where you have to have this unfortunate conversation with an individual on the show, whereas they're yelling at you that their panel isn't working, only to find out that they're still wearing their wireless headset and they haven't swapped headsets, right?
Yeah. Definitely this is the solution for it. It makes their headset, and then they can run away and talk. That's a good reason to do it. The reality is a stage manager often asks for a wireless belt pack, and a producer will ask for a wireless belt pack, and they'll never use it until maybe the producer might show up 5 minutes after the show started. But the people who do use it are the people backstage, audio and stuff like that, where it would be very advantageous for this to be the wireless headset for their panel. That's a great way to do it.
With stage managers, lighting guys up front of house sometimes, some other key positions that have that belt pack. A lot of long run TV shows do that kind of thing. Like I said, F1
Right.
racing. And anytime you can really just have that 2-second conversation with the individual that's going to be operating it, right? It's not that guy that shows up 5 seconds before air and is not going to test his comms, but those are going to be 90% of our problems anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So now you're saying you would just make this key her, but
remote that.
In addition to talking to sound effects here.
You could do both. You could actually do both.
In case the only reason you need to do both is if they had a headset plugged into their panel. Exactly. Let's say they didn't. If they didn't have let's just go ahead and add a function of a remote key to the Bolero pack, to the virtual keys, to number 1 called SFX, and press the key.
Yep.
So now we can get rid of the call to conference special effects here and we need to
Rename it.
rename
You also
this
have a
to
remote.
be
You have a remote on
SFX.
there that wasn't
Right.
completed.
Well, I can't actually send this to a frame, so that was another thing that I wish they would fix, is if you don't fully program something, it should just go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
no,
I start programming,
completely hear you on that one.
if I start programming a key, and then I go in here, now this one here, this is an undefined remote key here. Now, there's a
You cannot
little
send that
bit
to a frame.
you can't send it to a frame. It'll give you an error, and you can go up here to config errors and see. I haven't put CPUs in any of the notes, so these errors are showing here. But
The
you'd
top
see
one.
the key, and you can double click here, and it would take you to what had to be programmed. But then you have to read in the top row. Oh, it was on panel 411. Is where I made mistake, and then you have to go to the panel to actually do what you have to do. It's the option to delete it isn't in that screen right there.
And until
So
you
this is a
fix that
great-
error, you cannot send it to a frame.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I find it gives the producers and such a lot of flexibility. They love running away from their panel, and they like having that wireless headset and not having to swap headsets, obviously.
And the Bolero system is so low latency. I did a demo for AES where I invited every wireless company, 6 different wireless companies, to bring in their wireless systems and demo them and talk through the PA and compare their audio to the audio from a BTR. And they were all very enlightening. One of the companies used Bluetooth headsets, which made their product sound terrible. I won't say which company, but Riedel came in, and not only did they demo their Bolero, but they did not use the wireless mic for the presenter. They did the whole presentation right through the PA with the mic on the Bolero with no appreciable latency.
Isn't that nice?
No, very nice, very nice. So then back to our programming, we started doing we copied all the different panels. So for instance, here's the panel with the party lines copied, my first one with a reply on it. And this might be, you might want to add point-to-points here, depending on what the particular person need. Maybe if it's the LD, they probably won't want to speak to the audio and the ASM or the announcer. So you have to drag and drop buttons to customize it. Your C3s, the same thing. There's no easy way to do that. You'll have to just go through and set them all up to be the way you want, production on one and a particular channel on the other. There is a little trick with program. If I have a program feed let's down here on my stage node here on this input, let's make this program. And there are 2 ways to do program. One, I can put it in a party line. So here's the party line, and here's the program party line. And I can take this input and put the program party line in there. And what this does is when they put the program key on their panel, the button does nothing, but the volume control, the program audio is there all the time, and the volume control controls the level. I prefer to do it a little differently. I'll put the actual input of the channel. Let's take this out of here. I don't need to take that out, but so that's got the party line on it. But here on the ports on a particular panel, here we have a program feed, and that's the conference program feed. So on this button, when the program feed is on, the program level will mute it and turn the volumes on it, but the button does really nothing. So let's get rid of that. And let's take this program input, which we put on the input up here. Let's rename this program. And now if I put this button on there, it becomes a latchable button to turn the program on and off. You can push it. Now, one thing I didn't do in my defaults, if you go up here to settings options and you in miscellaneous, you turn on two things. Show the panel key mode. And I also like to turn on auto reverse talk for four wire, but not for group, just for 4-wire. So if I do a point-to-point using 4 wires, it basically programs both ends of the link. But now I have here these little letters showing on my panel that's showing they're all momentary. So what I need to do here in defaults, here in network, in the net on the top, here in properties, I want to set my key defaults. I want it to automatically be latching if it is. Where are you to do that? If I drag a port onto a key as a listen, it should show up at latching, and I thought I did it right here. Key defaults. Well, certainly I can double click on the key and make it latching.
Do you want to set the overall default, Pete?
Every time you drag a listen onto a panel, it wants to be latching.
You have to set that when, well, you don't have to set it when you're setting it up. As I recall, I think if we right click on net in the network tab and you go to properties, and then there's defaults, key
Port
mode.
setting.
And then, but that's key defaults. That's the default.
We'll
to that
find
key.
it in about a week. Exactly.
Yeah. You know, if nothing else, it's a very deep program with a lot you can do.
Yeah, yeah. Two of the other things I like to set in my defaults is the speaker dim level defaults to 9 dB or 12 dB. I forget what it, 18 dB, whatever it is. And this is every time you press a key on your panel, this is how much your speaker is going to dim. And it's just too much. So I lower this to 6 all the time. And let's say I forgot to lower it to 6 when I did my initial programming. I can always change it here, which is the default setting available in the net tab under properties. I can change it in there, and then I can go up into edit, into apply defaults to the entire system. So here I can check whatever thing I want to do, like the speaker dim level I changed, and I want to apply it to everything. I can just click on that one thing and say, okay, and now that everything in the entire system is changed to that. Another thing is if you look on details too, brightness of LEDs. These panels, 11/16s, are OLED panels, and at the best, they should be. I can't think of any situation where you wouldn't want to run them at 100% brightness because they're very dim. Maybe if you were in a very, very, very dark room and they were trying to see a video screen, but they're not very bright. If you run a DCP 1016, which has the old style LED buttons, they are so bright at 100%, you can still see them in direct sunlight. So if you're ever doing a show and you have a panel that's going to be out at the front of house and the guy's going to not have a tent over himself, using a 1016 series, a 1000 series 16, and then you'll be able to turn these up bright enough to see in the daylight. On a panel, one of the last settings, number 12 on my plan for the 15 setup, I set up a basic panel. So I basically set up all the buttons on the panel, set up the conferences. I put on the IFBs. If I want to create an IFB, I can do that on an earlier step. I missed that on back on step 3. IFB. There's a button up top here that says IFB. So in my ports, I'm going to go back to the ports here. I have an in and an out port here on my stage node, and the out is going to be to IFB transmitter. And then out at front of house, I'm going to connect to the console. Of course, this very well could be at the truck too. It could be anywhere, but at front of house here, I'm going to have an in out, and the in is going to be mix minus, which is going to come from an aux port of the console, and it's going to be whatever the IFB audio in the ear of the talent wants to be, and that might be just program, or it might be just their own voice. Who knows? It could be anything. And then on the out, it's going to be the listen. Actually, do I have this backwards here? Mix minus out, listen. No, that's right. So the out is going to be listen. No, I did it wrong. We don't need 2 outs. We need 2 ins.
Right. There's the
right.
There's
so
the
this is going to
list
be
to the talent mic.
right. This is going to be in. It's going to be in 447. And this is going to be the input, the pre-fade listen from the console of the wireless mic, or the console mic, or the lectern mic. So then we go up to the IFB, and we're going to put 3 things in it. We're going to make an IFB, and we're going to name it IFB. And the input to it, which is what the pre-fade mic, is going to be this in. It's going to be down in the eyes, in listen talent. And the mix minus is going to be mix minus part, which is also an in, going to be the in, word in mix minus. You're right there.
Yeah, you were on it.
And the output is going to be the transmitter, which is backstage, which is an out IFB transmitter. And we're going to put on the key, we're going to call it talent. And we can set the dim level. If this is how much it will dim when the director pushes the key. So then we can go to the the stage manager, Tracy, and open up her panel, and we can drag this one right here from anywhere onto their key, and that's the talent key. So now when they talk to it, it's called to IFB, and you see it says it underneath the key if I hover on it, called to IFB.
So Pete, why don't we answer a couple of questions here that have come up specifically around these things you've just been talking about?
Go for it.
Can you, you don't have the tab open? The question tab?
Open, oh wait. Yeah, I do, but I want to have them read to me.
Okay.
Okay, when I move from hardwired station to a wireless, I usually want a different mix of channels.
Yeah,
like
that was Ken Freeman commenting about when we were talking about making the virtual keys.
Listen, yeah, well, actually, the virtual key problem is the solution. Actually, is good because you've got 10 keys you can do as a virtual key into your Bolero pack from your main panel, and then you got 6 keys on the panel that you can do other stuff. You know, maybe it's not enough. Maybe that's what first thing I brought up, that it's likely that what you want on your wireless pack when you're down working on the stage with the dancers He's going to be totally different than what you're going to want on your show calling channel.
Right.
But it's perfect for the A2 who might have a button on his panel called Q, which would be the Q output from the front of house console. So when they're queuing up a mic in their Bolero headset, they can hear the mic they're actually putting on the talent. So Jeffrey wants to know, when using the panel to do remote keys, how do the volume keys on the panel works in regard to the bell pack? Well, the bell pack has its own listen volume. The virtual keys on the bell packs don't have volume. So you would have to set your volumes on the bell pack to be master level volumes instead of individual input volumes. So there's two modes you can set the Bolero to. One where the left one and the right one do volumes on 1 and 2, and then you step down to the next panel 3 and 4, and then step down to the next panel 5 and 6. Or you can set them to be master volumes for the entire bell pack. When setting the virtual keys on a Bolero pack, can the user still use the keys on their panel while keeping the Bolero headset on? Well, that was the whole point of programming it. So the Bolero pack is being remotely controlled by the panel. So your Bolero pack then has 16 buttons on it, 10 hidden virtual keys, and 6 keys actually on the top, which correspond to the same 10 you have on your panel. Plus the reply key on the bell pack is actually the red button on the side. So you actually have one more key than on a panel. And it would be basically your headset for the panel. And where was my scroll for the next question here is
So question about whether that AES session is available to watch anywhere.
I talked to AES and they shot it, they videoed it, and they talked about it, but they do not sell the videos of their shows, which is unfortunate. I think there's a recording of it you can buy, if I'm not mistaken, but not a video. Is that right, Mac?
I believe that is right.
When setting up IFBs, is any different between setting up with 4-wire with AS67?
And I would say no, that you're still just setting up an input and output port, whether it's an AEX
port support. So yeah, so you can AS67 ports. You can where's my Bolero node here? It's just another port. So I can make this AS67 port be a regular AS67 split in, AS67 split input or output.
I like that you can actually make it an input or an output, which is nice.
Yeah.
You can't do that with the AIO.
So you always end up with unused inputs, outputs laying all over the place. I don't know quite. It's a little annoying, but I can't think of a situation where I wouldn't want to have some unused inputs and outputs already programmed anyway.
You're thinking like I used to do, run and gun shows. Think of a facility where you just set it up and it just flows for years.
I can't imagine ever working on a show like that.
I know.
It doesn't exist in the industrial show. I mean, there used to be a terrible time in Bolero's history when even changing a type of a device on a panel necessitated resetting the whole system. And they got rid of that about version 6, I think. And so now there's virtually nothing you need to do to reset. I think
Bolero,
you might have to reset if you change a card setting, but it doesn't. I've never seen it give you an error message saying you had to do a reset.
And there's just one last comment in the questions, which John Sulik is saying that mobiletape.com does have the recordings from AES. I'm not positive that includes the video recordings. There's always been audio.
I think I looked into this and found out there was audio recordings, which, it's audio we're talking about, but they did show part of the equipment and that kind of
Right.
stuff. So it'd be,
Yeah.
you know, and then you don't get to see me. So what's the point of it, you know? So,
Right. Yeah.
So I wanted to show one other thing about importing your favorite things from another file. Now, obviously, if I started this recording here, this programming with a config file that I had all my favorite stuff in it already. But let's go out of this here and open up another file. So here's a file that probably has stuff in it. It has a little bit of logic in it that was from the original show, but I want to import from my template some macros. So I'm going to import my template, my artist template, and it's going to ask me what characters I want to put on the beginning of every title, every label in the file of importing, and I try to keep it simple. I just put a 1 because more than likely it's going to push it off the end of the 8-character limit.
I like to keep it simpler than that.
A space?
I put nothing.
I don't think. Well,
Trust me.
if I'm sure there's no duplicated ports,
Yes.
it would probably be okay. However, there were.
Yeah.
And it's simple. It's the address in node 2 changed from 2 to 3. Okay, so
yeah,
it did change
it takes
out.
care of things. Yeah.
So I'm going to do here.
That's
go
my own
to
little
this.
secret. You can keep that one.
So it doesn't ever care if you
I have
end up
not
with the same names.
any problems. No, because it's all based on the port. You can always give things identical names. If I remember right.
Interesting, because I'd never tried to do that, which is great. So here we are with this the new node in here. If we look in the network node, here's the node 1, which is the one I imported. And I suppose it would work better if I named it a higher node, like node 16 or something like that in my template. Wouldn't have had that first error. But here we go into logic. Now I've got logic items from both things, both from the show that was in there before and from my template. So I'm gonna, one of the things about logic is it uses the CPU in the node, in a particular node, to do all the processing. And let's say I wanted to get rid of this template node later. So I'm just gonna add a source. I'm gonna call it flash FOH. And I'm going to add a destination, and this is asking me where I want to put that. Now the options are all of the nodes. Well, I don't want to put it on node 1, which is the template I'm bringing in. So I'm going to put it on my backstage node here, that one there. So it's going to do all the processing there. I'm going to call it also flash. Flash at front of house. So now I've got 2 new things here, a destination flash front of house, and I'm going to open it up. Now, this is a trick that is not in the manual. You will read it nowhere in the Riedel manuals. It was showed to me by Radovan, a Riedel programmer, and he says they'd be shot if I showed anybody this trick. So I'm going to take the destination of the one from my first manual, and I'm going to plop it on top of this. It's going to replace the logic of flash FOH by the elements in the other flash. And now I'm going to take the source of flash front of house and I'm going to plop it on there. Now I've put this all in an existing system, and I can go delete the node 1 from the configuration. Now, unfortunately, you can't do the same thing with marker settings, marker definitions. It's a little hard to tell here. No, you actually can tell. I like to adjust the marker definitions so that the level LED is always yellow and it's always green when you turn it on, and it's always nothing when you turn it off. And if an input if audio is coming into that channel, it only turns on the first 3 or 4 buttons on the LEDs. Mostly because it in the default settings, they're all over the place, different colors, different things, different, and it gets very confusing, I think. So I always end up importing this or editing the marker settings, which are in the edit section, or if you happen to be working on the defaults for defaults for the whole thing here on net, the marker definitions will be in there as well. So the only way to get these in from your favorite is to start with your favorite node. Now, that being said, if I close this whole file, if I start with the template node here, discard all the changes. Now I've got my template. What if I import the other thing? Now that I know I don't have to put in a number there, now I'm going to import this show, and I'm going to call it nothing. I'm going to import it. I get the same error that it renumbered the node number, but now I've imported everything, including my favorite presets and my marker definitions from the other file. These are the marker definitions from my template file. Notice I only did 3 LEDs for incoming audio. And I have imported the same way before, all of the logic. Now, if I was planning on using this node, if this was actually a real node that I was going to add, I was going to add a 5th node to this thing, I wouldn't have to do anything, but I could still go through the same thing of dragging everything over to Logic. And then when I'm done, I'm going to save this as a new file. I'm going to save it as this with a new date. And now I'm going to delete this new node. Assume I brought all of the logic over I wanted to do. I just want to see if I delete this. Now, are all the markers still there from the original template? Yes, they are. So all the markers copied in because I imported the existing file on top of my template. So there's a way to copy your favorite marker settings, plus all your logic, plus all your defaults, because all of these defaults, the panel port defaults, 6 dB, the port settings, etc., all these different settings will copy into your new file that you got from Joe Blow, who did it last year with a different configuration of nodes. Copying panels. This is another great thing that Jeffrey asked about, which no other system does. Got it. Moving a panel between ports on an Atom system is painful. Involves cut and paste and search for and replace and all that sort of stuff. But very simple on a Riedel panel. Just open up your network stream here, open up your thing here. And if there's an empty slot anywhere in here in a port, let's see, here's an empty slot right here. And let's say all of a sudden I wanted to move a port from another node. Let's say I had the Video Village node here, this director node right here. Craig, the director all of a sudden wants to be that is Video Village, but let's say he wants to be at front of house. So here's front of house. And I have to kick off somebody because they all have 2-channel bell packs. Oh, at that node with the Cat 5 only node. Okay, so I give up there. So let's copy Video Village, the director, Craig Kelly. Let's say his port 1 died, and he's got points to all the different people and lots of different things programmed on his panel. I can just take his panel and drag it to any unused hole, and bingo, it's moved. All the point-to-points, everything moved, it's all done. Now this is true also if you are using anything programmed to this panel from any other panel, like a remote key button, or if I have this key programmed to do something on another panel, or I have virtual keys, dragging it around makes a new node. Now, what some shows do is, if you have a whole show designed and you have another show coming in, you might have pre-programmed all your new panels in another node, and then just connect it and drag your panels into the right node where you want to actually use them, if you couldn't program live on there. Was that the last one that you didn't put a time on? That was it.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's basically the 15 steps you need to take to do your program. Now, there's a lot of other little tricks which I alluded to more before. If this is, let's say this was my panel, and here's the production channel, and on the shift page there's nothing like that. And here in this particular network thing, I have a no truck interface, but let's say I have the camera PL on a 4-wire. That's a camera PL right there. That's actually the point-to-point for the camera PL. But if I wanted to control the level of this particular 4-wire, I can go into the port setting for the 4-wire, like this one right here. The problem is this program right here, even though it was programmed by me, is a mystery. Oh, here's the 4-wires. I remember I did that strange thing where I renamed them all to be to show up in particular places on the cross point. Well, here's my production channel input from the truck, and I'm going to change it to, instead of the configuration with directors using these knobs here, I'm going to change it to actually controlling it from my panel. So now I'm going to go to my panel. Let's say this is my panel, and on that key right there, I'm going to put a key called remote key, or set input output gain rather. And I can do that 2 different ways. I can specify a particular port, or I can do it where I put a key on this panel, and when I press it, every button on my panel that's programmed for remote key starts flashing. This way, I'm just going to change it so I change this one panel, which is the 4-wire, which is this one right here, and then I'm going to relabel it here, volume prod. So that's going to mean my truck volume level for the volume. And the button really selects input and output. If I push the left-hand side of the button, it does input. If I push the right-hand side of the button, it does output. The buttons actually have 2 switches under them. So if I push the left-hand side, it will say input, and then this volume control will control the input level. Push it again, it goes back to normal. Push the right-hand side, it says out, and this will control the output level. And what I do in my panel is I have an analog meter, a dB extended range analog meter, and I put it on the audio out of my panel. Audio P out. Where's my panel? Can't believe I was only on, oh, there it is, right there, right in front of me. So in the audio patches, I put on this output here, I put a meter. So these panels, when you double click the master volume control, every volume in the panel is set to a standard level. So I can double click the master volume control, then turn off the volumes I don't want to listen, and I can listen on my particular panel for what I want to hear, and then set the level for that particular thing. On the individual input panels here, this is a point-to-point. Where's the point-to-point? I don't think I had any point-to-points on here. Let's go to somebody who has a point-to-point. Well, I'll describe it. Let's say this is a point-to-point. On this particular panel, I can set this panel in a special mode called monitor mode. And I don't usually tell customers about this because then they'd all want to have it. Here in the properties of the panel, I set F1 to be monitoring, and I could set F1 to be monitoring and F2 to be copy reply. So now on this panel, any point to point, I press F1, and within 3 seconds, I press that point to point, and the little LED on the end turns yellow. That means I hear them anytime they talk to anybody.
Ah, the
I hear
famous
them.
snooping.
No, I hear them anytime they talk to anybody. I don't hear the other side of the conversation. The way to do that is there's a function called clone output port, which means you hear everything that's going out that port. Well, you can only put one clone button on a panel. But instead of doing it that way, let's say you wanted to use it for a bunch of people in your group, I can do a 4-wire port here. And on this port, I'm going to put a clone button, add the function clone output port, and I'm going to clone somebody's port, like this port down here, like this panel, Chris Kelly, the TD. And now this port right here, if I name the port, I can name it clone Kelly. Now, if I put that on my panel, which is COM panel back here, which is this one right here, I can put that port, which is, what node did I put that on? Maybe it's this one right here. There's my clone Kelly button. And I change it to a latching button from momentary. And now anybody can have that on their panel and listen to Kelly. I've used this on shows where people always wanted to listen into the stage manager. So what they're going to hear on this is everybody talking to that panel. You're cloning the output of the node. So you'll hear everybody talking to them on that panel. And if you use the monitor mode session, you hear everything they say. So between the two, monitor mode and the clone button, you hear everything going on in that panel. And there is actually no way to stop that from being programmed that way, like in Atom, where you can set privacy mode on a panel where nobody can listen to it no matter what they do. So come on, people,
Hey,
do
Peter.
something hard to program.
I've got a question for you, Pete.
Yeah.
Can you show us how to program a talk button so that it flashes? For my famous interaction with Scott Levine.
Only you know how to do that. You got the secret.
I don't remember. I've done it and I don't remember how.
Hey, Pete.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Before you move on to that, I'm sorry. I have to point out, you can actually make it so that no one can listen to the audio coming out of a panel. Do you know how to do that?
Oh,
Audio patch. Select audio patch. Create. So go into
Right.
audio patch.
right,
Okay, let's add a new audio patch.
right.
Okay.
I have to bring this over so I can see it here. Right,
All right, just name it mute.
right,
I always do this and call that mic mute. But then what you're going to want to do, because this audio patch is the audio router inside, audio
Right,
mixer inside
right.
of every panel, right?
right,
Okay, so click on the green dot for the microphone, mute it. Click mute.
right.
Okay, so that's muted. Do that in speaker mode as well. Mute that. Okay, so we can agree that the panel microphone and the headset microphone have no access to leave this panel to
Correct,
make sure it's
correct.
channel 1, right?
Correct.
So then
Yep.
we go back to the configuration of the panel. Rename that. Yeah. Go back to the configuration of the panel. Add a, you know what we're doing here, right? Select audio patch. This panel.
What panel was this here? The comm panel, I think.
Comms, yeah. Bolero Pete. Yep. Comms panel Bolero Pete. And we're going to say
Right.
mute.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Obviously, we'd use this with a latch and we'd rename that.
Right. Right.
Mic mute. Like I said, you want to use that with a latching function typically.
So
and so
yeah,
now you've created a mic mute.
That definitely will prevent people from listening to you, but if they have the monitor function on, once you start talking, they'll hear you.
If your mic mute is off, they will not hear you.
Well, who else is going to hear you? Nobody will hear you.
No one will hear
If I have
no
to, if I have to talk to automation,
yes,
I have to have my mic on.
there's no private that you're talking
Right,
about. Yes,
right.
but
Yeah,
but
that's the
a lot of
private
times,
that they have in Atom. It's a exclusive. Nobody can listen to it, even if you have a listen on, and only you can listen to it only if they're talking to you. So
Right. There's no snooping.
no snooping. Plenty of
you
snooping
could
in
get
Atom in
really
Riedel.
crazy. I could tell you a really crazy way to do it. It's, I mean, you
Yeah.
can only stack so many keys, right? But you can easily dim crosspoint and
Right.
do a stack of dims to everybody else.
Everybody
the people
else.
You don't want to, everybody
Yeah,
you don't want to hear yourself.
Yeah, you could put up to 32 different things on this key, and you might set that key to be a dim function, which will dim from one particular cross point, and one cross point might be
So this panel would be your cross point.
That panel right there, the source would be them. No, source would be me.
Source would be you.
Right.
And everybody you don't want to hear you
Right.
would
Right.
be the destination,
Now,
and you would dim to mute.
this is also useful. This is also the dim function I use all the time when
Love it.
people are sitting next to each other and they're both talking on production, but they hate hearing each other.
Whoa,
So they're both talking on production.
Why don't you use room codes?
No, but they want to hear some of each other.
Oh, well,
Right. Let's say they said, he's too loud in my production. I want him softer in my production. So if I just dim from one panel to the other, anything that panel was talking to the other is going to be that much less. It's not going to affect anybody else's in party lines.
Do you use listens? Because you can actually put a listen to the other individual.
Exactly. If you turn the listen to the port down, it takes precedence over anybody else in the party line. I did that once for a guy that wanted to have a volume control on his panel. The stage manager and the ASM wanted volume controls on their panel for each other. So we put a listen on each other's panel, and they then could adjust their listen for that person in the party line.
Yes. That's how you could like subtract somebody or even make somebody louder when they were talking in a party line.
But the key is it has to be their actual port that you put on a key, like a Listen
Yes.
key works, definitely.
And then the fun thing to do actually is you put a point to point on a key, right? To, let's say, your friend Jeff. I think you had somebody named Jeff. And
Right,
then
right.
you put what was it? Were we putting? I think we were putting a listen to port on the Vox. So every time they talked, right, the listen to port was on the Vox. So then their point to point volume would control their listen, and it would only work whenever they were talking. Does that make sense?
No.
So you don't want to tie
What's it
up.
supposed to be doing? You don't want to hear them?
So say you don't want to tie up two keys. You don't
Right.
want to have a point to point and a listen to port.
Oh, right, right.
Right.
Well, yeah, yeah, okay.
So you put the point to point on a key there, right? Because maybe you want
Right.
to talk to your friend every once in
Right.
a while. But you put the listen to them on the Vox, and then the volume knob to the right of the point to point controls their volume.
But wouldn't it
Try
always
it
control
sometime.
their volume?
It not subtracting them from like a different conference and other things. And you know how you have to engage a listen to port. You know how you have to latch a listen to port, right?
Oh, right,
If you
right.
put it on
Well,
a
if you
Vox,
mean
whenever they
if
talk,
you want to use the same key as your listen control and as you're
and your
talking
point
to
to
them.
point.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
You put the listen on the Vox.
right.
So anytime they talk, they're engaged, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I wanted when I got off the track a few subjects ago when we're talking about program volumes. So I wanted to talk about putting a program volume on a C3 belt pack without using a party line, so they could actually turn it on and off. And I just put the program volume down here, program key down there, and the program key was an input. I don't have it programmed in this system, programmed, no ins in there. Well, the key is I put a program in the input and I have it listen to use the second channel of the port. So then my program comes into the second channel and the volume is controllable. But then I can also put a party line on that same button and they can press the button and talk under the party line. But you don't get, you can use these as a third channel talk, volume control. These two buttons make the volume go up and down either way, but I find that putting it on the second volume is typical, good for a prompter operator. Or you can always flip the switches on the back of the C3 and make the audio go in line level. Now Mac's question, I'm avoiding Mac's question.
Well, that's a simple logic.
I think it was you that talked me through it the one time I was able to make it work. And maybe
Right.
Jeff could explain it. And I'll tell you, Jeff, what the problem was I had a director who was colorblind. And he felt he needed to latch on to production because there was going to be sections where he was going to be calling the show. So he needed, this was in a
He
corporate
wanted a
environment.
visual cue to know that he was on, and you made it a blinking thing.
Correct, because he was colorblind and
But we
couldn't.
didn't want to make every production in the entire system blink.
Well, you know, there's a couple of things you can do here. One thing that I would do personally, Pete, if you want to fly, I would go to his panel, pick whatever panel, doesn't matter.
Right.
Okay, and go to a key.
Right.
Pick one of your PLs, 10Q PL, right?
Okay.
Right there.
Yeah.
Right click on it, and then add a remote key. All right, and destination will be this panel. panel P614, right?
Right. All the way down the bottom.
It's always the last
Right.
one we're looking for. Okay,
Right.
and then our destination is going to be this key, which is not key 1. We're going to change it to whatever key this is. This is key 5. So drop our keys, key 5. All right. So what I would do is I would say a set text. For me, this is one way I would get around it. I would say set text, and I would say, you know, on, and then, you know, P10 or whatever, you know, not knowing
Now,
the
why
name.
can't we just take that same command and just take make a marker with a higher priority work?
You can do that too. And actually, when you're in the remote key here, the two things I do is on there, we've now changed the text. So when you press that key, right, you have a momentary, but it was, you know, you'd probably be using it with a latching. When you press that key, that new text we've given it will now overwrite what text is there.
Right.
So it'll now say on 10Q.
So yeah, try it in remote control mode. Try pushing 10Q in remote control and see what happens.
He doesn't have
I'm
a
not
frame.
connected to a frame.
Oh, don't have a frame, right? Yeah.
You
You're
have
gonna
to
have to
use
just trust me on this
imagination. Have to use imagination. But I
That's
think
it.
you could just pick one of the custom markers in here, and each of these has a priority, and the lower the number, the higher the priority. So
And as
your
I
typical
recall, you can only get to the user defined when you do a remote key. And you can actually, since we've now made that a remote key, we can actually give user defined 1 on there.
you can all use these one right here. User defined on any remote key. But that's we're
that's
using
what I'm
a
saying.
remote key.
They're used in conjunction with a remote key.
Right. So
you
if
see
this
what
is
I'm saying?
our user defined here, and we're going to make it be flashing yellow, just because it's flashing, and make it flash. So it's going to look like that when he's talking, and we'll turn on his volume control will be green. So here's his volume control on that same key, and they're flashing. So this is going to be user defined number 1. And what's his name? Name is director. So that's going to be the director key. So here on this key right here, we're going to add a remote key.
You can just edit that remote key that's already on there. You don't need to add another one.
I don't think I put one on there. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
I put 6 or 7 of them on there.
What happened to that other one we built?
I don't think we actually finished it. So in the signaling markers here, all the way down here, remote key. I don't know why the name didn't come through, but that now when you press the key, it's going to flash like that. Is that what you did, Mac?
The name didn't come through because the file wasn't pushed to a frame and saved through here.
Right.
That'll make the markers flash.
I think that's probably what I did. Except that
you could also turn on set key, and you can say, you know, prod on, or whatever you want it to say.
Right. Could have it say latched. I mean, that was his issue, was that he would latch on production and then forget to get off it when he was done calling his part of the show.
You ever set a timeout on those?
That would be great.
It wasn't going to be politically good to do to this director.
Yeah.
I've never had to use a timeout, but definitely something you can do.
So on the first page, you can have, if I have this unlatched, you can set a time. So we can, if the show's going to only be 2 hours long, 8 hours, make sure it's unlatched overnight. And then the color doesn't make any difference to him because he's colorblind. But
Colorblind.
right, should have a strobe mode. Actually, what you could do, you can put a strobe on the GPO output
Right.
of the
Yeah, that would be
back,
fine.
and just have him flash a giant strobe in his face every time the thing's on.
Yeah.
That would
Phaser
work
mode.
too. I
Yeah.
find that, you know, the little bicycle lights that have like a AA or AAA battery in them, and they flash and do all kinds of things. They only cost about $10 or so. I get those, and I wire a couple of wires into them. They need a little bit of destructive wiring inside to get rid of all the flasher modes. But then I just take those two wires and I stick them right on the GPO of a panel, and that's my little flasher light that I stick on a panel. All it
Which is
needs
a good idea.
is a contact closure.
So Stan Hunter has a question about where you set the global settings that show latching and momentary on the key buttons.
Settings, options, and in options under miscellaneous. And if they could bury it deeper, they would. And down here, about 3/4 of the way down, show panel key mode.
Cool.
Well, this is what I was looking for before. Automatically adjust speaker dim and key mode. If you turn that on, if I drag a listen key, an in key, where's an in? If I drag an in key, the panels are normally set, so any key I put on is momentary. But if I drag something onto it, it's not normal. That's momentary. It's a 4-wire. But if I take one of the ins, where are the ins? In should be an I. Here's program. I drag that on. See, it's a momentary right now. I drag it on. It's now a latching. And that's, again, the settings in options, miscellaneous. There's a bunch of other stuff in here which you can't. Partial files is something that's very useful if you're doing a show and there's a lot of changes in it, but it requires a purchasable dongle to do that. And I've done it on many Riedel shows, but they already own those dongles. I don't know where they got them from, but
I have one in my backpack.
there we go. There we go. Here you go, Mac. Show legacy panels for that guy in
Right.
Vegas, right?
No
So
legacy.
so that's pretty much it. You got your whole system planned. You've got all different kinds of tricks to do. I didn't show some of the other tricks I have, but on my website, bestaudio.com, there's a whole section on doing weird things with your Riedel panel.
Show the fun way to filter your ports there.
Which
You've
one?
been doing a lot in the port list, the filter, like the little Google
well,
bar.
yeah.
I'd
If
call
you
it,
have
yeah.
a weird, if I want to look for
Just inputs, just
PET, well, it does all of them. If I look for Pete,
exactly.
it shows all the things of Pete. So if you have a show like this that is all kinds of weird labels, you know, I could look for B space. That's going to show me most of the Boleros anywhere there's a B space, but it's on port 8. So B space 8, you can only show me the Bolero belt packs. So it's certainly the best way to find something. It's, somebody calls, no, this is Jarrett, Jar. Bang, I've got Jarrett's belt pack already, and I can get right to him.
Do you ever use the ports lists? I mean, I know you're running a gun in a lot. That's more of a studio thing.
Which one?
Go ports list. So
this one right here?
In that drop down.
Right.
So where it
Oh,
says
you mean this
all
here?
ports and system. Yeah. If you go to
No, I
manage,
don't really use that. That allows you to set presets for different things. Yeah.
So like your control room, your front of house, those kind of things,
Yeah.
you can actually
Yeah.
just quickly get to those areas. more of a fixed installation thing or production truck kind of thing. Long run shows, good thing to
Yeah,
do.
no, that's good. Occasionally I have somebody who wants a scroll list on their screen. And basically a scroll list is a list of a bunch of entries. You can just make it and copy it from you can copy it from a panel. Can't copy it from a panel. Where do I have to copy it from? Edit scroll list entry.
You drag the panels into, right. I think
Usage.
it's under general. I'm going to scroll list just a little bit. Scroll list. Are you in the scroll list tab? Scroll list 101.
The usage.
Yep.
General scroll list.
So general, you just drag over your ports that you want into that scroll
There we
list that
go.
you're making.
There we go.
And
So you
then,
drag whatever you want.
naming. Yep.
And then you define a key on a panel. Or if it's, you can't use scroll
You
lists on
can enable scroll list on a panel, yeah.
yeah, unfortunately you can't enable a scroll list on a Bolero pack, which is what most people ask for. Put a scroll
There's
list
more
on there.
keys.
And now this particular key, you enable it as scroll enable. And now when you push, double click on the volume key, can't do it here, but you double click on the volume key and then the scroll list shows up and you rotate the volume key till you find the one you want to talk to and then you press it. Now the same thing when I set my panel up to do monitoring, I set it up to do reply copy. Somebody calls me, it shows up here, I can press the double click on the volume control and then click this key and it will copy them right to that key permanently. Any other great tricks?
Jeff?
I'm trying to think. You've covered so much ground today. I mean,
Yeah,
logics are the next level of tricks, in my opinion, in the world out there. A lot of people like to know point-to-point ISOs and how those work, and setting up the properties of a key when you have a point-to-point to somebody.
Sure.
It's rare that somebody does that, but you know, those options are in there in the menus.
The thing about logics is when you're connected to a system, you can click on this little button here, live state, and then these lines change color if they're on. So when you're sitting there getting really bored during a show and don't have anything to do, like I am often, I sit and build logic diagrams and I just put these buttons on my panel and I push the button and see how they react. And there's all kinds of things in this logic function here besides and not, or not, -1, you know, timers, monoflop gates. There's a timer clock. You can do all kinds of tricks with the logic. Now, unfortunately, one of the things we requested as a modification to logic was if they just made an object which was a single box with 16 inputs and 1 output, and you could do stuff with your logic in it and save that box. And then just import that box and put some sources on it at a destination and you'd be done. But I think there's only 3 people in the whole world that use logic. So probably is not that a popular subject.
So that means there's only 2 of them besides you, Pete?
Exactly.
You should have seen what I was doing at the XFL.
Yeah, I bet.
So John Christie's asking about remote mic kill for stage manager. In my experience,
remote mic
that'll get you
on-
killed. But
well, you can always go into the remote control mode where you can see their panel and push their buttons.
right, and
And
that's with
I
any
do that if somebody leaves their mic on and walks away, and all you hear is their headset clunking down on the table. Then I will go in and turn their mic off.
Right, so at least you don't hear it when they pick it back up again.
Or something. So now the only thing missing from this system is some actual hardware.
I've got some to the left of me.
There we go. That's what we needed. There we go. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much it. And hopefully the 12 people who listen to this thing can get something. Actually, there were 33. And
got down to 33.
And hope you got something out of it. And hopefully, if you don't already have copies of Director, you went and downloaded a copy, because that link will not last forever. There is most people can just go on the Riedel website and apply for access to their download directory. And I don't think they've ever really refused anybody access to it. So you can get in there and download the copies anyone want. But it's one of those things where you have to apply and wait till next week when they're in the office, or next month, and then they'll approve it.
So Pete, John Christie explained his question about the remote mic kill. And what
Yeah.
he was talking about was giving the stage manager, not killing the stage manager's mic, which is a dangerous thing to do, but giving the stage manager a mic that kills a button that kills everybody else's mic, so that the stage manager can just override everybody.
Well, override in what way?
Well, I mean, if there's a lot of chatter going on and the stage manager has a cue coming up, they just kill everybody else. They can't talk, and the stage manager.
Well, if we have,
Give it
let's say this
priority.
is the production channel right here, we go into the production channel into conference, and we change its priority to emergency, or any of these ones in between.
Or high. Yeah.
Or high. And if you go into the properties settings up here, in the properties settings of here, into where is it? Right, port settings. Here it is. If he was at standard. So if I set it for high, it's going to dim it 18 dB. Everybody else on that channel. If I set it for emergency, it's going to mute everybody else on the channel. So this is the way we used to do IFBs before there was an IFB function. Is we used to set buttons to have a different priority, and that would mute the feed coming in for the IFB.
An interesting
So
fun thing.
What's that?
I was going to say an interesting fun thing with this and the priorities that you're looking at there
Right.
is I have talked about with several customers building an emergency channel, PL, okay, conference.
Right.
And then I'll put it on the Vox of every panel in the system. And then I will use a logic, okay, to fire a virtual key on X panel, because it has to be a virtual key if we're going to talk on that conference, obviously. I'll make that individual two keys, right? Like a nuclear safety switch. You got to turn two keys to launch the missile.
You have to use press one with your toe and one with your left hand, right?
So we separate them way out on the panel, something they're never going to do. But you hold these two keys down, and all of a sudden, you're talking on the emergency channel to everybody in the vicinity, or well, everybody that has a panel, right? Everybody that has a belt pack, everybody that you've put that emergency channel on. And with the world we live in today, you might want to be able to say, hey, there's a COVID outbreak, get out. But you know what I mean? Like it's something you can pitch, you know, with safety features, especially in big convention
Sure,
centers and
sure.
stuff like that. I've seen it too many times, and we don't add it in right where they'll now have the ability to put on the screens. There's an emergency button somebody has to hit, and all of a sudden all the screens are this emergency message to get out of the building. Well, what if we could add to that? Hey, comms is now
Sure,
tied to that. So now
sure.
everybody that's getting a paycheck here today that's on comms now has additional information to help everybody else get out of the building or what
Yeah,
have you,
yeah.
right?
And because I always insist on everything in my comm system being on UPS, I've been in situations, in fact, at the Energy Center in Salt Lake City, we're in the middle of our dress rehearsal and the entire building power is turned off, totally dead. All the lights, pitch dark in the thing. Some emergency lights come on, and the only thing that's working is the comm system. And
As it
30
should be.
seconds later, all the power came back on, much to the chagrin of the lighting people who blew out half of their moving lights because they weren't able to turn them off before the power came back on. And this was the local power company doing a test of disconnecting the power.
Yeah, so this stuff right here, this priority setting can be very, very useful, you know, and especially the emergency, because remember, somebody's got that emergency, everybody else is muted. The only thing everybody with a comms pack and this channel on it is hearing is that individual talking, you know?
Yeah. Well, I do it often for stage managers anyway. I move them up one step and turn it down. So at least their call goes through at a slightly higher level than somebody blabbing back to them.
Do you
The
ever
other
put the
thing
cameras at a lower priority?
So they can't talk?
Oh,
Sorry,
that's a
Chuck,
great
continue,
idea, Jeff.
Yeah. Another thing I do is when you have point-to-points like this one right here, call to director Craig Kelly, and he turns off the listen on his panel to you. If I go in here to the call button, I disable the cross-point volume adjust at the destination, so they can't turn my volume down. I come through at full volume, no matter what the volume's set at. A lot of people turn off all the listens on their buttons because they have too much noise, and they go and they turn off all the listens on the point-to-points.
Right.
Which is pointless, as it were.
As it were, but they don't understand the difference between a PL and a point-to-point.
I used to name all my point-to-points with a period at the beginning.
And I still do.
Instead of doing them in capitals. But it didn't get the message across. They still ignored it.
Do you ever put additional text on the shift page so that people know they're on the shift page?
Yes.
I used to do that in the days before I could lock the shift page. Now they used to have to say on the shift page, push shift 4 keys, text across the thing. But a couple of versions ago, maybe version 7 or something, they added in every panel on the detail 2 page, shift key mode standard or lock on standard or shift, and in the headset mode, standard, lock on speaker mode or headset mode. So they don't actually use it. Sometimes people want a mute key for their panel, and unless it causes too much noise, I just tell them to use the speaker key. And therefore, it comes out of their speaker, but their mic on their headset is muted.
Right.
Occasionally, some panels hiss or make noise when there's no gooseneck mic plugged in. So I'd have to short that out.
Which you should be able to impact by going there and just changing the audio patch for the speaker mode. The cross
You could
points
do that. Yeah. In the,
I mean, you have to adjust it, but you can just go speaker mode and.
So we're on speaker mode. We can just turn this off, mute this amplifier.
We could also mute the panel mic there too, so that way you don't get that if there is. I mean, but it might be an electrical thing that's sometimes that shouldn't be.
Or even
obviously,
just this.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. What I usually do on shows is this cross point right here, I turn into an adjust from command. And then on my panel, I put a volume control on my panel to control the volume on this, and it controls plus or minus 12, I think. Whereas down here in the volume of the panel, like if I do volume for this thing right here, it only does -3 and plus. So I can't turn somebody down very much. Whereas here, I can do plus 12. Oh, I got to have this off here. I can do plus 12 and minus. So if I set this and then underneath each of the point-to-points on my shift page, I have a little volume control, adjust auto patch from key. So I can just quickly adjust the level on a single person. So I will have all my panels set in monitor mode. So I'll just punch somebody into monitor mode so I hear them all the time and turn off all my other listens, watch them on my meter and set the level for their particular mic. The other thing I do as a manner of course is I turn the compressor down to 1.25 to 1 and turn the output level of the limiter up to plus 12, which compensates for the compressor not working. Because it sounds so much better. The compressor is just such a hard compressor at its default setting of 2.5 to 1. No good for those singers on the comm system. Certainly, if it's an announcer, I will turn their compressor all the way down to 1 to 1.
It is a digital.
Exactly. So now do you remember how to do that?
One is the mic amplifier inside of the panel, and the other one's a digital gain and biblical argument.
Which is? They're all digital gains. None of this exists in the panel.
Well, I mean,
it's all in the car input card. Because the only thing that comes back and forth the panel is AES audio and a control stream based on the buttons. No.
Yeah,
this stream, and
audio
these two
patch
streams.
exists in the panel.
None of this exists in the panel. It's all done in the frame.
I'm losing my feed here.
Yeah.
I know, and that's just such a bummer, Jeff, because I'm ready for you to go to battle with Pete.
The mic pre is inside of it.
Well, there's a mic pre. There's a mic pre, but and maybe some of these volumes here might be in there, but I'd be willing to bet they're not. I bet they're all in the frame.
I don't know, Pete. I bet that.
And
that
I'm
part
telling
there.
you, if you trust me, I've opened that electronics, my friend. But I can also tell you there that cross point pick and poke there that you're looking at right now. If you select and mute that, it does not leave the panel. It's not a cross point thing on the card. It's not going to the CPU card. It's not getting to the frame. It doesn't leave the frame. Audio patch exists in the panel.
I don't believe it.
I'll tell you that from what I know, that on the right-hand side, it's a digital gain, whereas the mic pre is an analog mic pre.
We'll have to rip a panel apart.
I would search out and share the electrical drawings with you, but
and you believe them? Those are propaganda put out by the engineers.
I believe the drawings.
Exactly. Now that's a nice panel. I have never done a show with done a show with that panel. I want to do a show with that panel.
That's right. Now that there is a nice panel.
Yep.
They might even accept that on the Tonight Show.
It's so expensive, nobody will buy them in the rental.
I am lucky enough to have one at home right now.
Yep, exactly.
You know what? You say that, but I'm selling a lot of them. There.
Oh yeah,
a lot of them out there.
These things are beautiful.
So,
Well,
there's some rental houses.
Everything else is really nice.
Do they have a small desktop version of that now too? A 12-button version of that? Any day
No.
now. Any day now.
A desktop version, no.
Yeah. I like that because that little touch screens on the middle to control all different kinds of things.
My audience.
Push that upper left-hand button on that panel,
doesn't read
push
very
it
well
up,
on
and it
the-
increases
on
the
screen, but
bandwidth
yeah,
from your
touch
microphone.
screen stuff.
Well, you know what? We're losing you, Jeff. And I love that panel. I think that's the bottom line there. Pete, Jeff,
It's
thanks
been
for
fun.
taking us
been
through
fun.
this. It was
Now if we can just
good one.
do a show. I've got 5 different Riedel shows programmed already.
There you go. That's right. Plenty of
Ready to go
programming.
out of the box.
That's
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
As long as you're doing the show that we have programmed, we have the show for you.
Piece of cake. Piece of cake.
That's so while we still have our audience before they disappear, next week, gonna have a 3-day week. All right, everybody's gonna, I don't know what we're gonna do with ourselves, but we're doing a 3-day week because they're just such big topics. Monday, a friend of ours, David Beckwith from Riedel, Jeff's coworker, is going to be back. And at 4 p.m. Eastern, we're doing a discussion around Luminex switch configurations and AES 67 and Bolero. You know, after we did 2110, everybody's like, that's great. We want to talk about Luminex switches now. We knew that coming out of that. And so we're going to do Monday, Luminex switches. All right. We know that's a really popular topic, and that's going to take us through Artist, Bolero, configuration, ASS, everything, right? With that. Wednesday, we're doing audio sound design for broadcast sports. All right. Again, after we did the A1 panel, we knew that everybody's going to be like, but I want to talk about mixing the sports, right? No problem. Got Carl Malone from NBC, director of sound design for their sports and Olympics, right? And then for Dave Gruntvig, who was with us on A1 panel, will be back. He does Turner Sports, CBS Sports, talking about mic selection, where to use it, how they use it, what's important to creating that soundscape. And then finally, Friday Fiber Guy. We got Jesse Madison is coming in. Another one of those things right there with the switch discussion, Luminex, all about fiber maintenance. All right, he's going to talk about test gear. He's going to talk about how to best take care of these connectors in the field, the whole 9 yards there, right? He's got a great program. He's taught this many times, so please get in there now because I think that one's going to fill up pretty big. Jesse's opening it up to all his customers as well. Spread the word. You know, we're out on Pro Sound Web this weekend, you know, with all our schedule. We've updated the website, but let everybody know these are all topics that everybody said, please continue to talk about. That's what we're doing. So spread the word. We'll be there. Meanwhile, it's weekend again. Is this crazy or what? Man, this week
Now,
just
in the
days for work.
downloadable handouts with the video on our website is the macro, the Excel macro that I used in that Excel sheet for
Excel
stripping
macaroni?
off for stripping off all the macaroni. Exactly. Plus all of the same things you have here, but make sure you download your director download from that PDF that's in the handouts in the live. That will not be in the handout section on the video.
Correct. That
And if
is
you
for
didn't hear me
limited time
say
only.
limited
Friday.
time only, and there is a video that's
Okay.
brand new. It's the first time we've ever done that.
Yep. First time. Is there a video?
Exactly.
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to binge watch this show all weekend.
Oh my God. That's so awesome.
I bet
That's
I
so
can
awesome.
fit in every one of the 47 practical show tech shows in one weekend.
There
Everyone.
you go. Well, on that note, it's hard to believe that all 32 attendees actually stayed on while we bantered about nothing. Thank you
They
for
all
doing
walked
that.
away from their
Still
computers.
on.
Exactly.
There, Jeff's still on.
I came back.
You made it back and you sound way better and you got a cool looking panel. Folks, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Go sign up now.
Sign up now.
Oh, got his Bolero pack. He's good to go. Oh, now
Oh,
he's
you didn't talk about Fiber Guy. Fiber Guy Friday.
I did talk about Fiber Guy Friday.
Okay. I was asleep.
I'm not going to argue that. So, anyhow, have a great weekend. Mac, Pete, Jeff, thanks for joining us, buddy.
Yep,
We'll look
bye-bye.
forward to seeing you again. You got it.